Hello and welcome to the Political Dispatch, the podcast that explores big ideas and policies shaping our world. I'm Sid Kurupati.
I'm Lily Mott. Today we're examining what has truly been an extraordinary year for conflict across Asia.
And I'm Tom Spett. From the nuclear arms standoff between India and Pakistan to the devastating civil war in Myanmar, from the resumed hostilities in Gaza to the Iran-Israel confrontation that drew in the United States, 2025 has been a year of profound instability across the continent. We'll be looking at how these conflicts interconnect and what they mean for the broader international order.
So, over the next 20 minutes, I'll be taking you through each of these major conflicts, their latest developments, and the diplomatic efforts to resolve them. Let's begin. We begin with what President Trump has called the 12-day war, a direct military confrontation between Israel and Iran that shook the Middle East in June. Between June 13 and 24 June, Israel and Iran engaged in the most intense military exchange in their decades-long shadow conflict, ultimately ending with a Trump-brokered ceasefire. The conflict escalated dramatically when the United States directly entered the fray, with President Trump ordering strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities using B-2 bombers and 30,000-pound bunker-buster bombs. Trump described the strikes as a spectacular military success and warned Iran that the U.S. could go after additional targets if Iran does not make peace. During the 12-day conflict, Iran repeatedly struck back at Israel, causing severe damage to major cities like Tel Aviv and killing 28 people. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei declared that Iran will not surrender and warned that any U.S. military intervention would result in irreparable damage. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked Trump for standing alongside us and claimed the operation had set back Iran's nuclear program for a very long time. Iran's nuclear installations were badly damaged, according to the Iranian officials, but the extent remains disputed. However, diplomatic efforts have intensified since the ceasefire. European foreign ministers from the UK, France, and Germany met with the Iranian foreign minister Abbas Araghchi in Geneva, marking the most significant diplomatic talks since the conflict began. The EU has offered to facilitate a return to nuclear negotiations, with the foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas stating that negotiations on Iran's nuclear program should restart as soon as possible. However, obstacles remain. Iran has refused to resume nuclear talks with the United States, while Israel strikes continue, and Trump has continued his critical rhetoric towards Iranian leadership. Secret diplomatic efforts are reportedly underway to bring Tehran back to negotiations, though progress appears limited. The ceasefire remains fragile. 4 hours after the ceasefire was supposed to take effect, Israel launched a strike against Iran in retaliation for what it said were 2 ballistic missiles entering its airspace, prompting Trump to express frustration, stating he was really unhappy that Israel went out this morning and criticizing both countries' decision-making. As we move further eastward, in May, South Asia witnessed its most serious military confrontation since 1971, following the Pahalgam terrorist attack in April 2025, which killed 25 Indian tourists in Kashmir. A crisis emerged between India and Pakistan that led to armed skirmishes along the line of control beginning 24th April. On 7 May 2025, India launched Operation Sindoor, conducting missile and airstrikes against 9 sites across Pakistan-administered Azad Kashmir. This marked a significant escalation for the first time since 1971, where India conducted airstrikes in particular, not only in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, but also in Pakistan Punjab, the heartland of Pakistan's army. Prime Minister Modi announced a new Indian military doctrine following the conflict, signaling a more aggressive stance and declaring that India will respond to terrorism on its own terms and will no longer be deterred by nuclear blackmail. Pakistan responded with UAV and drone attacks on Indian military installations in Gujarat and Rajasthan, with India claiming to have destroyed 70 of those drones, including Turkish-origin Songar armed drones. Pakistani officials consistently denied involvement in the Pahalgam attack and called for an independent investigation while proposing a neutral third-party investigation which India ignored. A ceasefire was announced in early May, but both countries subsequently accused each other of violating the agreement. The human cost of this conflict was significant. Reports indicate that 31 Pakistani civilians were killed in the Indian strikes, while the conflict marked the most intense use of force between India and Pakistan since the 1971 war. Following the conflict, both nations launched unprecedented diplomatic campaigns, where India dispatched 7 delegations to 33 foreign capitals, emphasizing Pakistan's alleged link to terrorism. Pakistan, on the other hand, led by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, embarked on a 5-day diplomatic blitz to Azerbaijan, Turkey, Iran, and Tajikistan, accompanied by Army Chief Asim Munir, seeking to project Pakistan as peaceful and India as the aggressor. The United States played a key mediation role, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance engaging both the prime ministers. Also, Iran offered mediation services early on in the crisis, while China called for restraint. Multiple countries, from Algeria to Vatican, welcomed the eventual ceasefire and urged lasting peace through dialogue. Beyond military action, India took unprecedented non-military steps, including suspending the Indus Water Treaty for the first time, halting all trade, and closing the only open land border between the two countries. Trump initially characterized the crisis in historical terms, stating that the two nations have had long-standing disputes, but later claimed a role in mediating the ceasefire, though Indian officials disputed the extent of the American involvement. And we progress further east, where Myanmar's civil war, now in its 5th year since the 2021 military coup, continues to tear the country apart. In Jan 2025, the junta announced plans for general elections by the end of the year or early 2026 to consolidate political control, though observers fear elections could lead to more violence. The junta's leader, Min Aung Hlaing, has positioned the elections as a pathway to domestic and international legitimacy, despite controlling only limited territory. The resistance, however, gained significant momentum in 2024. As of late October, pro-democracy fighters advanced to within kilometers of Mandalay, Myanmar's second-largest city, marking a dramatic shift from jungle warfare to potential urban combat. The National Unity Government's acting president, Duwa Lashila, has declared 2025 as the year they aim for complete elimination of the junta leader, seeking what he calls a tipping point similar to Syria when al-Assad fled. Opposition forces now control most of Rakhine State and territory from the Chinese border to near Mandalay. However, the resistance faces the challenge of junta's air superiority, with attack helicopters and fighter jets accounting to increasing civilian casualties. The junta's desperate offer of an olive branch earlier in September, urging resistance groups to participate in elections, was rejected by all the opposition forces. International recognition of the National Unity Government continues to grow, however, with the US, EU, and Australia recognizing it as the legitimate government. China remains the junta's primary supporter, brokering ceasefires to protect its economic interests, even though Beijing has pressed for elections to legitimize military rule. However, this humanitarian crisis deepens daily. As of April 2025, over 6,000 civilians are reported to have been killed during the civil war, including 1,400 women and about 700 children. The UN estimates that as of March 2025, there are over 3.5 million internally displaced persons in Myanmar. On March 28, 2025, the Myanmar earthquake struck the country, deepening the nation's humanitarian crisis and shifting the focus of the civil war. The disaster became yet another battleground, with the junta choosing the chaos to position itself as the only actor capable of coordinating disaster response, attempting to block aid efforts of the region. And as we move further east of Myanmar, we come to a conflict that has been little reported in mainstream news. While larger conflicts dominated headlines, the South China Sea remained a dangerous flashpoint throughout 2025. Chinese Coast Guard vessels and Philippine forces engaged in numerous confrontations, marking a significant escalation in what analysts call gray zone tactics. In May 2025, the Philippine Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources condemned what it said was the aggressive interference of the Chinese Coast Guard, which fired water cannons and sideswept a Filipino government vessel during a research voyage. The encounter occurred near the Spratly Islands, about 60 nautical miles from the Philippine coast, well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. These incidents reflect China's systematic strategy of asserting control over nearly the entire South China Sea. The Chinese Coast Guard personnel attacked Philippine forces during a June incident earlier this year, in which a Philippine Navy SEAL lost his finger due to a collision with a Chinese small boat. The confrontations have become increasingly physical, with Chinese vessels using military-grade lasers and water cannons against Philippine ships. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who took office in June 2022, rejected the conciliatory stance towards China adopted by his predecessor. The Philippines has implemented what analysts call a transparency strategy, systematically documenting Chinese aggression with independent journalists aboard Philippine vessels to expose dangerous Chinese Coast Guard actions and impose reputational costs on Beijing. Marcos himself has positioned as a defender of Philippine sovereignty, stating his determination to protect the country's maritime rights under international law. However, Chinese responses have been firm in defending their position. Chinese officials maintain that they are exercising sovereignty over what they characterize as historical territorial waters. The Coast Guard of China has stated that its operations aim to firmly safeguard China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests while disputing Philippines' characterization of their activities. And more recently, in July 2025, Southeast Asia witnessed an unexpected escalation as Thailand and Cambodia engaged in their worst fighting in more than a decade. The conflict, which began on 24 July near the disputed Tam Mueang Tom Temple, has killed at least 32 people and displaced over 130,000 civilians from both sides of the border. The immediate trigger was a series of landmine explosions that injured Thai soldiers, including one who lost his leg. Thailand accused Cambodia of laying new mines on the Thai side of the border, when the following day heavy fighting erupted involving artillery, rockets, and for the first time, fighter jets, marking a significant escalation from the previous border skirmishes. Thailand declared martial law in 8 border districts and scrambled F-16 fighter jets to bomb Cambodian targets, while Cambodia fired long-range rockets towards the Thai civilian areas. Both sides have accused each other of initiating the violence, which has spread to at least 12 locations along the disputed 818-kilometer border. The conflict stems from the ambiguities in the Franco-Siamese Treaty of 1904, which established border demarcations during French colonial rule in Cambodia. The border areas contain century-old temples claimed by both sides. Previous clashes occurred in 2012 near the Priyavihar temple, killing 15 to 20 people. ASEAN chair Malaysia proposed a ceasefire through Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, which Cambodia accepted, but Thailand initially backed, then withdrew from. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting while the US called for immediate cessation of attacks. China, Cambodia's close ally, offered to play a constructive mediation role. The acting Thai Prime Minister warned that the escalation could develop into war, while the Cambodian Prime Minister called for urgent UN intervention, saying the violence gravely threatened peace in the region. And lastly, we move westward, where perhaps the most gruesome conflict of this century is taking place. In the Middle East, hopes for lasting peace in Gaza were dashed in March. On 18 March 2025, a hostage ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas ended and armed conflict resumed in Gaza. The ceasefire had taken effect from Jan to March, including 8 rounds of hostage and prisoner exchanges between Israel and Hamas. However, citing Hamas' refusal to extend Stage 1 of the 2025 agreement, on 2nd March, Israel stopped all aid into Gaza and then, on 9th March, cut off all of Gaza's electricity supply. Some observers have noted that the 18th March attacks occurred on the same day Netanyahu was scheduled to testify in his ongoing corruption trial, leading to the postponement of legal proceedings. Throughout the war, members of Netanyahu's coalition have publicly called for the permanent conquest of Gaza and re-establishment of Jewish settlements there. Opposition members have criticized Netanyahu's government, claiming it has failed to eliminate Hamas's military capabilities or rescue the remaining Israeli hostages. President Trump has proposed that Gaza's 2 million Palestinians be relocated from the Strip, stating his intention regarding Gaza's future governance. However, international diplomatic pressure has intensified, with G7 foreign ministers and European governments warning Israel against blocking humanitarian aid. As of July 2025, indirect talks between Israel and Hamas have shown little progress. Despite Trump meeting with Netanyahu in Washington and expressing hope for a ceasefire, no breakthrough has materialized. Reports suggest that Netanyahu is under real US pressure but remains focused on maintaining Israeli military operations. Hamas continues to demand guarantees that Israel cannot restart the war once a ceasefire is reached. Trump's proposals for Gaza's future, including Palestinian relocation, have added complexity to diplomatic efforts, while coalition members continue calling for permanent conquest and settlement of Gaza. But perhaps the worst part of this conflict has been the humanitarian toll and the cost of human lives, where over 54,000 Palestinians have been killed, 125,000 injured, and nearly all of 2.3 million residents displaced. The UN has reported that Israeli attacks on women's healthcare facilities amount to genocidal acts. So, what is the broader picture that we're looking at? These conflicts reflect deeper patterns of instability across Asia. Nuclear deterrence, long seen as a stabilizing force, appears increasingly fragile. The May 2025 India-Pakistan conflict marked a significant escalation that challenges the stability of deterrence between the two nuclear-armed adversaries.
Regional powers are struggling to manage the fallout. China has steadily increased its involvement in Myanmar, seeking an end to the fighting to preserve the military junta and ensure stability, brokering several ceasefires with mixed results. In the Middle East, traditional alliances are being tested as conflicts intersect and escalate.
What's particularly concerning is how these individual conflicts are feeding into each other, creating a cascade effect across the region. The strain on international diplomatic mechanisms is evident from the UN Security Council's emergency meetings on multiple fronts to the exhaustion of traditional mediation channels. We're seeing a system that was designed for managing isolated disputes, struggling to cope with simultaneous interconnected crises.
So, why has Asia become the center for global conflict? To understand this, we must examine the deeper structural forces at play. What we're witnessing is the culmination of long building geopolitical pressures reaching a breaking point.
At the heart of this instability is intensifying US-China competition, creating what analysts call multi-aligned framework, more fragmented and prone to military conflicts. The post-war order that once provided stability is splintering.
Trump's return has accelerated these dynamics through more transactional, bilateral policies that reduce predictability. Traditional alliance structures are being tested as economic blocs form along geopolitical lines, replacing the interconnected global economy that once constrained conflict. Climate pressures add another stress layer, from Myanmar's devastating earthquake to India-Pakistan water disputes. Advanced weapons technology has lowered conflict thresholds, while nuclear proliferation complicates deterrence calculations. The result is structural volatility, where conflicts escalate rapidly and unpredictably, diplomatic tools seem less effective, and international peacekeeping struggles continue.
So, as we move into the second half of 2025, the question remains, can diplomacy triumph over the cycle of violence that has defined this year? The ceasefires that are in place are fragile, and the underlying grievances that fuel these conflicts continue to remain unresolved.
What we've witnessed this year is not just a series of isolated conflicts, but a broader breakdown of the post-war order that has governed international relations for decades. From the nuclear threshold in South Asia to proxy wars of the Middle East, the rules that once constrained state behavior seem to be fraying.
The people caught in the crossfire, the tourists in Pahalgam, the families in Gaza, the civilians in Myanmar, the border communities in Thailand and Cambodia, remind us that behind every strategic calculation and geopolitical maneuver are real human lives. Their stories, their suffering, and their hopes for peace must not be forgotten as the world grapples with these crises. The interconnected nature of these conflicts suggests that solutions, too, must be coordinated. Piecemeal approaches to individual disputes may no longer suffice in an era where regional instability can cascade across borders and domains. The challenge for international diplomacy is developing frameworks that can address not just the symptoms, but the structural causes of this unprecedented wave of Asian conflicts.
That's all from us this week. You can find us wherever you found this episode. Please like, subscribe, and share our show so we can reach more people and drive up interest in the podcast. I'm Tom Spare.
I'm Lily Mott.
And I'm Sid Kodapati. You've been listening to the Political Dispatch.